Your Excellency, Mrs. Vasundhara Raje, Chief Minister of Rajasthan, Honourable Members of Parliament, members of the Parliamentary Women's League of Friendship with India. So it's a very special league, I think, for us. My colleagues from the Diplomatic Corps, ladies and gentlemen. I haven't seen this room so full of ladies, and so I'm particularly happy here. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for being here. It's a great honor and privilege for me to introduce the Chief Minister of Rajasthan, Mrs. Vasundhara Raje. And the reason for this is because I think she stands for everything that women can aspire to be and can achieve. I don't know if you know what a chief minister means. It's really being a prime minister of a country. And her country is geographically the largest state of India, and it has a population of over 70 million. And the chief minister has had, to reach this position, she of course has had a long stint as a politician, starting at the grassroots level, starting as a young party worker. She belongs to the Bharatiya Janata Party. And then really working her way up through a system which I'm afraid, very much like Japan, is very, very patriarchal. And therefore, to be accepted finally, and this is the second time around that she's become Chief Minister of the state. She became Chief Minister in 2003 for the first time. And I could tell you this is no small achievement. It's much easier to be an ambassador, I could tell you that, as a lady ambassador. I'm very often asked, I mean, is this unusual in India? And no, it isn't. You know, if you qualify, if you're educated, you qualify for an exam and you can make it to the bureaucracy. But it's different with politicians. It's really, you know, you have to work the people, they have to accept you, you have to get through all kinds of biases, you know, which are attitudinal. Maybe all our laws are perfect as far as gender equality is concerned. But it's the mind, and it's the mind of men, and how do you change that, and how to make yourself acceptable. And me, therefore, are really, you know, happy because she is a role model, I think, for lots and lots of young people, not only women, I think also for men, to be able to learn to respect a woman. And it's what she brings to the table. I think along with, you know, education, wisdom, knowledge, all of that, she perhaps brings to her job something which women have in abundance, and that is intuition. I think that intuitive feeling as to what you should do for your people. And she has been extremely sensitive to all those who are disadvantaged in society. And I think part of that disadvantage in society are also women, particularly if they're socially and economically disadvantaged. So she's had a slew of programs which really focus at women who need help, which she will talk to us about. And I think this is what has made a lot of difference. But the Honourable Chief Minister, as you will see her, I mean, she is a lady like anyone else. It doesn't mean if you're a politician that you've got to lose your sense of being a beautiful woman, being feminine, having other interests. She has a lot of other interests: gardening, horse riding, reading. So very, very exceptional person that we have amidst us. Ma'am, it's such a pleasure to really invite you here and to have you here among us. We also have today, who will be addressing us, is Ms. Inoguchi, who is one of the founder members of, we have a Japan-India Parliamentary Friendship League, but we also have a women's section in this league. And it started because Prime Minister Modi, when he was here last September, looked at the audience and saw that there were very few women, but said, why don't you start a women's league? And I'm so happy that, you know, they immediately rose to the occasion, and now we have a women's league. I must say, with due respect to all the men here, there's something very special about women, because when we meet up, I think there's an immediate empathy across, across continents, cultures. There's something very, very common that we have with other women, and which binds us. I think probably I would have said common suffering, but it's not always common suffering. But it's just that being, I think, in some ways, historically, perhaps a gender that was somehow ignored, and now we're finding our own place under the sun. And with those few words, I'd like to say that, you know, I look forward to this evening. What we will have is, we will have Ms. Inoguchi talk to us also about what is happening in Japan, and we'll have Ms. Doden, who will help us, you know, to take some questions. I have just one message before I step down. I know you want to hear the Chief Minister and Ms. Inoguchi. I just want to say that in India, I think it was people like Mrs. Vasundhara Raje who really led the movement for the empowerment of women, as I said, through example, but also because in some way being educated and privileged, all of us are unprivileged, people who've been educated in India, who have no glass ceiling really. We've had presidents and prime ministers who've been women. But then what we have done is that we have tried to lead, and she has tried to lead and help women disadvantaged, because we believe that whatever answer comes to being able to bring about equality among women must be homegrown and has to come from the ethos of our own countries. And I think that's one thought that I have felt as I've interacted with my friends in Japan. And once again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Ambassador. Next, may we invite Dr. Kuniko Inoguchi to give her speech? Providing me with this opportunity to address this very distinguished group of audience. Her Excellency Ambassador Deepa Wadhwa, and in the presence of Honorable Mrs. Raje, Honorable Chief Minister of Rajasthan. It is indeed my great honor to make a few comments on the empowerment of women and girls of Japan, India, and beyond. And I also would like to take this opportunity to report to you, as Ambassador has just did for us, that in response to the suggestion of Honorable Prime Minister of Narendra Modi of India, when he visited us, and when he made a very inspiring and moving statement, I think it was in September 2nd, at Kensei Kinen Kaikan, this is a hall of constitutional democracy of Japan, he suggested that after all these years, there should exist women's parliamentary league for India and Japan to put more strong focus on gender-based needs and agenda. And therefore, we all will be able to focus more to the real needs of women and girls. I think common characteristics of women who wants to help other women is that we take those suggestions very seriously and respond very quickly to such brilliant suggestions. So I consulted Parliamentarian Takagi, who's sitting right next to me, that we should really work to set up such a parliamentarian women's league for Japan and India. And we did that 30th of October. For the first time in our history, I think we have this women's parliamentary league for bilateral issues. We will be working very hard to address some of the important issues of how women and girls can do better in both countries. We have started discussion on some of the pressing agenda, and it is my hope that we'll be able to draft suggestions for the basic, what we call basic framework of budget for the fiscal year 2016. I mean, that's how we operate. Okay, parliamentarians will come up with agenda, make suggestions for the budgetary process, and finally put things to work. So what are some of the pillars of our discourse? In our view, education for all. Let girls learn. And we have a lot of experience of how we can make girls learn. Of course, after graduation, many girls will have difficulty getting equal employment opportunities. But first you have to have educational opportunities to empower yourself. I'm sure in India, the situation is improving a lot. A parliamentarian told us that if we could, for example, in a way of being very, very pragmatic and realistic, if we could, for example, provide assistance to set up more toilets for women, girls may be able to continue to learn. And so there could be something that women parliamentarians can talk and discuss with very strong focus of what is the real needs, of what is the real bottlenecks that serves as a problem for girls in making their further learning. Now, other issues which we have to discuss, at least in Japan, is public financing of childcare. Because all these years, childcare is your job, women's job. It's very difficult to have both work and family. So now our Prime Minister is putting a lot of effort to quadruple almost the budget for childcare expenses. And then comes how more men can participate in house chores or child raising, how we can have better balance between men and women, having both family and life. So this is what we call work-life balance. In order to do that, we have to have shorter working hours. Some of the bureaucrats most recently told me that Kazumi-Yaseki, the center of bureaucracies of this country, is now trying to prohibit sort of working late hours, so that parliamentarians will have to put questions for the diet a few days prior to the question that he or she will be asking, so that bureaucrats don't have to work very long hours right before the day of the parliament. So a lot of things is now going on to help work-life balance come to reality. In the end, this shouldn't be just for Japan and India. We have to go beyond. So what we would like to suggest is like ODA of the women, by the women, or for the women. I mean, we want to see more Japanese women working at the frontier of ODA activities, international cooperation, with very strong and sensitive understanding of real needs that hinders real development in many countries. We want to work for women. We want more women to work for women, and how we could put that into a policy process is to be seen. But with this Women's Parliamentary League for India and Japan, we should be able to advance those policy agenda, not only for bilaterals, but that go beyond our countries to the needs of the region and probably beyond. So those are things that we'll be discussing in this format, and I very much like to thank this opportunity to present our views to Madame Raje, Chief Prime Minister, since she has been very active, energetic, and inspiring. And I think that is exactly what we need when we want to make a breakthrough. What Ambassador has told us about the special sort of efforts that politicians must make, we are now in the midst of this, because we are in the midst of this prefectural elections week. But my prefecture is Chiba Prefecture, which is right next to Tokyo, where the Narita airport is. I decided to take my time out of my constituency to meet Chief Minister Rajasthan. Thank you so much for your presence, Chief Minister, and it is indeed our great honor to listen to you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Inaguchi. Ladies and gentlemen, we shall give the floor to Her Excellency Mrs. Vasundhara Raje, the Honorable Chief Minister of Indian state of Rajasthan, for her keynote address. I was going to read out some introduction of her, but since Ambassador has given extensive, great introduction already, so I'll just cut short. But anyway, I would say Madame Raj is an articulate speaker, and she is committed to pushing for reforms to empower Indian women across the social and economic spectrum. She was recognized by the United Nations in 2007 for her efforts to assist women in self-empowerment.
Mrs. Inaguchi, Mrs. Takagi, and Mrs. Abe, members of Parliament, representatives of the Diplomatic Corps, Mrs. Aiko Duden, who will moderate the question and answer session, my own colleagues, but most of all, the lady who has made this possible and who has, in these last 2 days, made a huge impression on all of us who have made this trip from India, are Her Excellency, the Ambassador, Mrs. Deepa Gopalan Bhagwa, and all my friends who are present here today. Thank you for being here. It is really very kind of you. I am not going to make this a very big one, but I had written something down. But after listening to all of you, I really don't think that it's worthwhile reading out any of these things. I just like to go back to some part of my own life and start from there. I was lucky to come from a very privileged background. It is a ruling family that went to actually, before we came to the democratic part of our country, they were all broken up into states. So these ruling families and the states came together to form the Union of India. So at the time, my father and mother, when my mother got married, she married into the state, this wonderful palace, and everything else, but she came from a very small family. And these families were not exposed, you couldn't possibly go out. They were very closely guarded in their own families and homes. And so when she got married to my father, it became even worse. Because when you married into these families, what happened was that you were covered from head to foot. You could not be seen outside. You had your own saloons, you had your own planes, you had everything. But when you stepped off your plane, or you stepped off the railway compartment, there would be these, what do you call them, curtains all the way to the car. So you had to walk within that. And when you got into the car, it was dark glasses. In those days, there were curtains in front of that too. And no one, they could hear you pass, but no one ever saw what you looked like. So my mother was an educated woman. She came from a small family that lived in a remote part of the state that I came from, which is Madhya Pradesh, was in the heart of the country. But she had, because her mother died early, her father was a deputy collector, and it was a small family, but he had sent her to educate herself in Lucknow, which is a part of the big province of Uttar Pradesh. There she met a lot of people, and she educated herself, and she didn't think this was the right thing to do. In the old days, girls were chosen for marriage, not by sitting across with each other, talking to each other, but by sending photographs to the families. And certainly her photograph could not have come before my father, because they were very, very screened. It had to be only princesses from very high families that had to have their pictures in that. But one of her uncles was working in the palace, unbeknownst to my family. And he slipped a picture of hers into the package, which was all those so-called eligible ladies who were going to come up before him. Fortunately for us and unfortunately for a lot of people, he selected that picture and that created a huge harush in the state. He then proceeded to marry her despite all the odds. So when she got married, she said that she had obviously been sent with a purpose. She said, I came from a very small family, and for me to go into this very, very large family, for this very well-known family, God must have sent her there with a purpose. She was a very God-fearing person. And you know, when we got married, in the oldest days, even today, we are veiled to some extent. But in those days, they were veiled to a complete extent. You could only know that there was a human inside that. So you had to walk around and you couldn't see anything. All you could see was feet and the ground. And she said as she went around the fire, which you had to do 7 times, as she went around the fire, she only saw feet, and she made a commitment to God and herself that since she was now marrying into a state, that hers would not be a nuclear family, that she would make the difference to the women of her state, that they would not be allowed to look at just feet, and that she would bring together a family, and that the family would not be just her kids, but the rest of the state. Well, in a very short while, she persuaded my father that this veil was not a good idea. And so they went on to do something which was very unacceptable in those days, which was remove the veil completely. But she believed that by doing that, she was able to set the example for a lot of other women in the state, which otherwise would probably have taken a longer while to do. But she then said to my father that it's very important that we don't stop here. It's not about me unveiling my face to the public. It's about me using the opportunities that I have to create opportunities for other women who are not going to be able to get out of their homes or even see the light of day. So she and my father set up schools for girls, universities and colleges for girls, and she went around talking to the people who used to come to the darbar, which is the place where everybody used to collect, and she said that any one of these people who do not allow their wives and their daughters to go to these universities to study and who allow them to be veiled all the time will not be allowed into the darbar of the ruler. So, perforce, they had to remove it, and before we knew it, the girls started to go to college. So that was the first step. And it is from there that when my father passed away, she went on into politics. And she went on to politics because when the ruling families all disappeared, the democratic setups came in. But she went on to become and to win and never lost an election. But I believe that it was a strong belief in herself and a strong belief in the faith in the fact that it was the women population of the state and of her own constituency that would respond to her. And therefore she owed them something. That instilled this deep thing of politics in all of us. At one point in time, there were 3 of us who were members of parliament, my mother and myself and my brother. And then when my brother passed away, it's today my son, my brother's son, and my sister was there for a while, but she's gone on now. All of us are committed to this. And so we've made an effort. And I said to my mother, I said, I can't go into politics. It's a difficult world. And I've been educated. I am, allowed to go to university. I was allowed all that. But even then, my brother said to me, no university abroad. So and my father had passed away by then. We were, well, educated and looking forward to doing more. So he said to my mother, because the boys then stand in for the fathers when the fathers pass away. So he stood in and he said that the girls will not be allowed to go abroad because we know what happens in universities abroad. Extremely feudal and completely parochial, and I thought not the right way to go, but I wasn't able to go abroad to study. But I remembered that, and as things eased up, because of course he couldn't remain that way for very long, he had to deal with the women of his own constituency. So, as we moved out of that, he actually said to me that maybe it's not such a good idea to even go into politics. And my mother said it's rubbish. These girls would be allowed to do the things that I was allowed to do. So, I was going to be allowed to go into politics, but before that I had to get married. My brother said this has to be arranged. So we will call the person in and they will have to agree to each other. There's none of this going out and about and finding a man and then getting married and settle down. So it was an arranged marriage. In India, not all arranged marriages come unstuck. Some of them go on and on forever, and they are very good. In the olden days, this was a very big thing, and people stood by it. But unfortunately, mine didn't. So, they say there is no place for women who are on their own. And now there are two things. First of all, the fact that you come from a very, very remote family, which is not supposed to do these things. Then you are not allowed to participate in the manner that you could have participated at one point in time. But now, the world is changing around you, and you would like to be part of that movement. It took a little bit of doing to get into it. I lost my first election, and I was extremely upset about it, because somehow I thought that it was another gender, a strike against gender, but it wasn't actually. It was the fact that Prime Minister Indira Gandhi passed away, of course from a women's movement. Nobody won elections in that year, with just except two in the opposition. So it had nothing to do with gender, but I understood that later. And we went on, and as we went on and into elections, my mother said one thing to me, and she said, remember, you don't go into this. So there's an advantage if you're going in as a woman. Go in with the advantages of women. Do not try to emulate the normal politicians or the male politicians. So how would you deal with your own family? How would you care for your own family? So there's no caste, there's no creed. There are political parties before the election, but after the election, if you have won, then they are all yours, and then you must serve them all, because they all become your responsibility. So this is a creed that I have kept like a mantra in front of me. I have done all these years, 5 years in the 5 terms in Parliament, and now I think 3 terms in the Vidhan Sabha, which is the assembly of the prefecture, as you said, and stood by this. And I have discovered that when you reach them with love and affection, it comes back double-fold to you. So I was very lucky. I have not managed to lose any single one of my elections as yet. But I found that the support system came to me hugely from women. So when I went into my first parliamentary election, that's 5 terms in Parliament, my first parliamentary election, when I went into my election, there was a village that I went to, and I found, when sitting in the village square, there was me with my mic, and there was a huge bunch of men in front of me. Around the houses, which are the houses around the square, women stood with their faces half covered in the windows, on the balconies, with each other, but segregated from the men. When I spoke really to a male audience. But I knew my voice was carrying to the first floor, to those windows and the doors where all the women were sitting. After the meeting, of course, I was able to go and meet them, but you had to meet them inside the house, where they sat at the fireplace, where they went cooking, or where they were inside the house. You went in and met the women. 5 years, 5 terms down the line, now when I go back, with all the reforms that have taken place, it's a whole different story. And the story began when we decided in government to give 50% reservation to women at the grassroots level to enter elections. At that point in time, the men said, why are you bothering with these ladies? You know, it's us who are going to do the work. So it's all right. I mean, you know, let her cover her face. She can go home and make the tea. And we will do the signing for her, so you don't have to worry about it. And so this whole idea is to change the system. So I'm afraid you may have to learn how to make tea. And she's going to learn how to sign her name. And she's going to sit in that chair. Now, many years down the line, lots of changes have taken place there too. So now when I go back to my constituency, and I stand in the square is full of women, and the windows and doors and are the men. We still have a problem because they don't sit together, but there are changes, and if you wish to take it further, you're welcome to do that. Similarly, with those ladies who went to grassroots politics, they sit in the chair. That veil has gone up to this level because they said they won't be able to see anything, they won't be able to write anything, they'll be of no use to man or beast. Why don't you allow us to do it? I said no, and they're going to learn, and they've learned. Now their veils are here, the men go home, they come very happily to office and they make very good decisions. And they win their elections on their own steam. Of course, family members have to help out. You can hardly be a distance away from it. But that's the change. Very recently, in 2003, we decided the way to actually empower women is not just to educate them, but to give them financial freedom. Because the day they have the financial freedom, then they are not dependent on the male members of their family. And maybe they don't have a lot, but they have enough to stand on their own feet with. And I thought that was very important. So we came up with a scheme. Today, of course, it's called the Direct Benefit Cash Transfer Scheme. It was something that was taken up very shortly after us in the government of Mrs. Sonia Gandhi. And they called that the Aadhaar scheme, where they created cards with the numbers. So it became almost like an identity card, but it was to be linked with banks. It followed in this government by another scheme which has now linked that card with the banks. We had started doing that in 2006 because we believed, and we did it differently. We said that it's not just about every family, it's about empowering the woman of that family. So this card will be in the name of her as the leader of the family, and the rest of the family names will also be on the card, but she is going to be the person who will operate that account. So this now is in the process actually allowing her that financial freedom, which I believe to some extent we've been able to do. To that we added education reforms. You know, there is a group of women or girls, adolescent girls, that just drop out. From age 2, they send them all to nursery school, 3, they send them to nursery schools, very much to get them out of their hair. Let them all go, they go to the nursery school. In the nursery schools, we give them meals. But I said it was important that we give them hot meals throughout. Now, if you give hot meals throughout, it means the mother doesn't have to cook at home. It means she will send the daughter and allow the daughter to be in school also. The other thing is the transportation of these girls, because they have now entered the puberty age. So the age between 9 and 12 is the age where they all dropped out of school. Now that was an age. They didn't come to school because there were no toilets. They had to share a toilet, perhaps with the other boys of the class. This became very, very disturbing for them. Also, the mothers want to pull them out now because they say that in any case we can't have the mixing with the boys. There are no toilets. And anyway, we should teach them how to cook, sweep, and get ready to get married. Because now they've attained the age. Also, transportation was very different and very difficult. So what do we do about that? So we did something different. We said that all girls who stay in class up to 9 will also eat with everybody. I mean, we will organize hot meals for them. Anyone who stays up to the 9th class will be given transportation either in the form of a coupon, or she will anyway go back with a cycle. So now cycle. Everybody said, family said cycle. And if there are 2 girls going, that's 2 cycles. So it's a good thing that we keep the girl in school till the 9th class. But then we said after that, if she gets a good mark and goes on to finish her 12th class, and she passes her 12th with 70% and over, then we give her a scooty. You know those 2-wheelers? They make a lot of difference to people's travel and things there. So it's a 2-wheeler, like a Vespa. So we give her a 2-wheeler. That made the girls stay on there too. So now, the educational levels on these very small initiatives started to move forward. The girls started to stay in school. But the toilets, this became a problem because, as you know, in India, being a vast country and because nobody's ever taken trouble to think about this, this has been one of the major problems for women. So the Prime Minister's new program of creating toilets, of creating districts which are completely open defecation free, these are things that we're going to have to put a lot of our attention to, and we've started putting our attention to it for a while. Cleaning and keeping clean your cities, that comes very naturally to women in any case. Educating didn't. Having institutional deliveries didn't. You had them at home, but now with a small monetary benefit, with vehicles to bring them into hospital, we've increased that also a great deal. I actually believe that the day you educate your woman, that day you educate the family. And then men and women are really like two wings on a bird. It cannot fly with one, and you have to empower the other, because only then can it really fly. So to get this bird to fly, it's right that we should have the rights to be able to realize ourselves. And if you and I can do it, it's very important that through us, so many more, because we are privileged, so many more of them can also have the opportunity to fly. So we worked with all of this. Now very recently at the grassroots level, and again there was a huge cry out about this, I said that these elections, and the elections are for 6,000 or 7,000 people in just the state of Rajasthan. There are 3 or 4 layers that go into this grassroots election. And they are very important to any party, because that's the base of any party in that. So I said to them, they will have to be educated. So you will have to educate anyone who wants to fight this election, man or woman, will have to be at least 8th pass. And there was this huge cry. Oh God, I mean, you know, the rights, human rights, and all kinds of things started happening with this. I said, I don't care, we are going to do it. We did it. And then I called a meeting of all those people who had got elected. And I was amazed. There were only 4 or 5 grey hairs. There were only 4 or 5 grey heads in this group. There were people who'd done PGs. There were people who'd done IITs. There were people who had done IIMs. There were people who had done, there were doctors, there were business people, people who'd done MBAs. I mean, it was the most amazing mix of people. And that day when I stood on the podium, and that's not more than about 3 weeks ago, I think it was. And 3 weeks ago, when I saw these, I was so excited. I thought, oh goodness, there is a wave that is happening. Something new has happened in Rajasthan. And now all of these, because they're educated, are going to go back, take responsibility for the money that has come into their districts, use it effectively, hopefully, to make things happen for those small number of people. It was not just about the MP, because the MP cannot look after every village. It is not about the legislative assembly person, because that one also can't look at all the villages. But it is at the head of every village. If he's educated or she's educated, they make the difference to all of these. And amount of women that were over there, it knocked me completely out. I was so very pleased about it to see that we have made that journey from that parda, what we call parda, or that complete covering where you couldn't get out to do anything, from there to here, in this period of time, is a stupendous piece of work. And what I'd like to say to you is that it wasn't hard. I think that if you actually believe in yourself, and if you believe in womankind, we can work together to do this and make it happen. It's just that collective wisdom. But it isn't only women. I have to actually thank men folk, because without them it wouldn't have happened either. So it's something that doesn't exclude them from it. I think it's something that is all-inclusive. It is something that makes us both work together. It's something that makes people understand that if one is looser than the other, if one is lesser than the other, the development for that area cannot happen. So today, I think that there's the differences. Now, when we had party meetings, and we used to insist, and then I was a woman, I used to insist that the women should be part of the party meeting. And when I'd get to the meeting, I find all the men there, but no women. So finally told them all, I said, you have wives at home. So the least that you can do is bring your wives. Because if you think that you can come to this party meeting and you think that your wife cannot, then you are not going to be able to go out to convince the rest of the population that they should have their women go out to vote. Why should they? You can't get your woman, your wife, your daughter, your family members. Why should anybody else? The only way to do it is to make yourself do it. So when the party started to change, the atmosphere started to change. The women started to come in. People started to work together. There wasn't about, oh, she's a woman, or he's a man and he can do it. It became like, we can do it. And we can work together to make things happen. And that's the change that's happening. And that's the difference that we can make. And if we decide that we can do it, it isn't difficult. So it's a question of actually promising yourself to this. And I've seen it happen in small bits and pieces. I've seen that women of some privilege can go to great heights. You've seen that with, we had a president, lady president, Pratibha Patil, not so long ago. We had Indira Gandhi. We had Sonia Gandhi. We have lots of women ministers at the state level and also at the seniority level, at the parliament level. And I think the time has come that if we are all going to be there, then really we should be able to extend this courtesy to the others. Other thing I have to say is that I don't believe that women need to have anything reserved for them. I really believe that we're there because we're the best. We're better than all of them. That's the reason why. Otherwise, one of them would have taken it. Am I right? So if you can't take it, and I was better than you, then why should you undermine me by making it look like you were grand enough to allow me to come in? I don't think that's right. I think that it's very important to allow this balance to happen, and may the best man / woman win. That's how it's got to be. And I believe we're going in that direction. So I always say to my women, so this time in the Vidhan Sabha, there are 14% women, or maybe more. And I think that probably in the Rajasthan Vidhan Sabha, we've been steadily but surely pushing and pushing to make it happen. So this time we are on, and I will continue to do this. When the bottom layer is completely now saturated, women are there because 50% had to be women in any case. But I think that when you come out of that and you get to a level, then you should be there because, not because someone's done you a favor, but because you are what you are, and because there couldn't be anyone better than you. So I always say to women that it's not just about privilege. It's about education, it's about passion, and it's about the will to do something. And if you have that, who can stop you? Thank you very much. By the way, I just point out, on our delegation, out of 8 of us, I think there are 4 of us women. Me, you, Dinu, Amrita, there's 4 of us women. And then the icing on the cake is the ambassador. Thank you very much. And by the way, when I met the newspaper people this morning, there were a large number of women, right? So it seems to be there were 13 women in the room. There was a lot of women there also. So I was really pleased to see that. Thank you.
Now we move on to the question and answer session. I pass on the stage to Ms. Aiko Doden to moderate the session. Ms. Doden is a senior commentator and chief producer of Japan's national public broadcasting organization called NHK.
I am pulling my chair towards you so that I can listen to you more closely. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aiko Doden, senior commentator for NHK Japan Broadcasting Corporation. what a privilege it is today to be able to be exposed to the views of three visionary women leaders representing India and Japan. And we have both Rajasthan Chief Minister Raje and Ambassador Wadhwa for a conversation on empowering women. And in the interest of time, perhaps I would ask one or two questions and then take questions from the floor. So please do prepare to ask questions to these two women leaders. Let me start by asking a question to you, Chief Minister. You spoke earlier at the press conference this morning on the significance of empowering women and to promote women's advancement in Rajasthan, where you said that the system can be quite feudal. And changing the mindset and the norm of the society can be difficult in any cultures, and you have spoken about that in your presentation as well. How did you manage to bring about that change in your state?
I think that one, you have to be by example. So first of all, I think this is the first time that Rajasthan has chosen a woman as the Chief Minister, because we are a very feudal state. So that alone has made women feel that if she can do it, we can do it. That's one. Second, we've laid a lot of emphasis on education for women, trying to keep women in school, even in that difficult adolescent period when everyone just drops out. We believe that if we educate, then the next generation of women are not going to ask for child marriages. They are not going to ask for early marriages, and if that doesn't happen, then there will be a drop in population. So there will be an improvement in the standard of family life. You know, because otherwise, if it's just about having babies and just looking after those kids, it doesn't work. Then you cannot afford to even look after them. So it's very important when that happens. And if you start doing things like institutional deliveries, if you start getting women to learn how to handle bank accounts, if you allow women to join self-help groups, earn their own money and stand on their own feet, and if you empower them enough to understand that they could fight an election and win it at any level, then I believe that some part of this work is done. So that's the road we've taken. To some extent, we have been successful, but I believe it is a long road, and it will not happen overnight. But if everyone puts their backs to it, then everyone works at it, the results will come on the table. I've already seen those results. So I'm sure that it will change.
And my follow-up question to you, Ambassador Wadhwa. As the Chief Minister articulated her initiatives in the state of Rajasthan, what makes women's empowerment so important for a specific state and for India in general?
Thank you very much for that question. I'll tell you from my own perspective. I think when India sends out a woman as an ambassador, and I'm not talking about myself, but anyway, I think it's making such a powerful statement about the status of women in India. Because, women in India, of course, like everywhere, it's sort of half the population, and we have really fought our way through to where we are. In 1947, I keep giving the statistic that the literacy rate for women was 9%. That was 9 out of 100 women in India. After 250 years of rule by an advanced European state, we were just 9 out of 100 women were educated. So it's been really quite a sort of a long struggle for women to come up. And as the Honourable Chief Minister said, if you are not able to empower half your population, then how can you really develop as a country? So I think this is why it's very important for all of us.
And one of your scheme in the state of Rajasthan, you have introduced the Bhamasha scheme, which is the scheme under which bank accounts in the name of a woman. I believe it's not just about having a bank account to yourself, but it means perhaps confidence on the part of the women. What impact did it have on the lives of women?
Well, it's still getting rolled out. Some of it has happened, some of it is still happening. But basically, there's a value to her. Now, I mean, the gentlemen of the family and other members of the family have to actually talk to her about that account, because everything that is government spent on them, whether it's a pension, whether it's an old age or a disability pension, whether it's because you had the baby in the hospital, whether it's what do you call that, PDS, grains, public distribution schemes, all of these go into that account. Now that account belongs to the family, but she operates it. That's a big power. And that power actually empowers her in the eyes of the rest of the family. And when that happens, it happens in the community. And when that happens, she has the confidence to be able to step out and say, yes, I can do it. And that I am the person who's changing the life of my family. It's a very big, I think, step to be allowed to stand shoulder to shoulder with the rest of them.
But in your implementation of such schemes, have you not had any opposition from the men members saying, why are you bringing about the change?
Not really, I must say, they've been very cooperative.
Is it because they see that it will be in their interest as well, in the long run?
Well, this would have gone to the family anyway. And the family is a unit. The husband will stand by the wife. There are rare occasions where they don't get on, that's a different issue altogether. But the family stays together, and because it stays together, it's grateful that one member of the family has got it. So it could have been male, but this time it's female. It doesn't make that much of a difference in the long run. It's good.
Now, please do ask questions from